Good evening and welcome to the March 2nd, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. My name is James McCartney. I'm the chair. I'd ask that we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you for that in stereo. So moving on to agenda item number 3, roll call. Supervisor Weiss.
Here.
Supervisor Lewis.
I'm here, Mr. Chairman, if it would be okay. I plan to come into the meeting. I was late from a work meeting, and so I will be there in about 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Absolutely. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
All right. Just don't take any important votes without me.
Yeah, and don't speak. We don't want you getting a
Thank you very much.
All right, no problem.
Yep,
Supervisor Blundy
I'm here.
and Supervisor Grenier. Grenier. I'm sorry.
I appreciate good
Grenier.
effort. I appreciate that. I am here. Thank you.
Grenier. All right. So public comment on agenda items will be taken as each item is discussed. Agenda item number 4, community announcements. Reminder, during this portion of the agenda, residents and youth organizations may call in to make a special announcement or contact the township at admin@lmt.org to request a special announcement be added to the agenda. Pool registration is now open. The pool today before the discount period ends on March 4th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Is there any other community announcements by supervisors? Anybody in the audience?
Yeah.
Dan?
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had a couple of people ask me to announce, sort of timely in some ways. This is February 28th to March 4th is North American Invasive Species Awareness Week. Also, I guess it's NISAW. So this is, it's an international event to raise awareness about invasive species, the threats that they pose, and what can be done to prevent their spread. You can go to nisaw.org to learn about lots of events, webinars, etc. Some are local, some are more national that are promoting some educational events that seem quite useful. They're spread out through the week.
Excellent. Any other announcements? Doesn't sound like it. All right, moving on to agenda item number 5. Consider approval of minutes for February 2nd, 2022.
So moved. You got it. Okay.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blundy. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise their hand and say aye.
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 Agenda item number 6, consider approval of minutes for February 16th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blundy. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Agenda item number 7, consider approval of minutes for February 21st, 2022 special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Weiss, seconded by Supervisor Blundy. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed?
I'm abstaining, James, since I wasn't in attendance.
No problem. And I'm not sure what John would have done, but okay, we can just go 301 with Supervisor Grenier abstaining. I think I said it right that time.
You can say Grenier if that's easier. It's the French way.
I'm going to say Grenier.
All right.
Agenda item number 8, Joe Fiacco. Is he going to be here or is he online?
Here he is.
Hey, Joe.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Do you want to give us an update on Sandy Run Road? Some additional recommendations that you've been observing over the past few months?
Yes, I have a PowerPoint here. I'm going to attempt to bring it up. Let's see if I can share my screen. There we Yep, can you guys see that?
Yes, sir.
I'm just taking it from the beginning in case there's anybody in the audience that doesn't know the history, but we're talking about the Sandy Run Road project. And actually it was the interim reopening back in 2017, before I was working for the township. There was a site distance issue on Edgewood Road, and in the interest of public safety, it was decided to close the intersection of Sandy Run because of the significant shortage of sight distance on the approach. While a solution was being, solutions were being considered, SAFE was asked. At this point, we were the appointed traffic engineer for the township. Is there any way that we can come up with temporary access for, at least temporary access for Sandy Run Road while we were looking for a long-term solution? So when we looked at this Sandy Run, the speeds on Edgewood Road approaching Sandy Run, they were about 37 miles per hour. So heading westbound on Sandy Run, Edgewood Road approaching Sandy Run, the 85th percentile speed, which is what we use in traffic engineering for design purposes, was 37 miles per hour. The posted speed limit on the road is 25 miles per hour. In addition to that, there's a grade going down from the railroad tracks to Sandy Run. I apologize for my voice. I'm fighting a head cold, and I'm doing my best here. So the minimum safe sight distance to the east of Sandy Run was insufficient for the speeds that were being realized. And when we say minimum safe sight distance, that's you're driving down a road at a given speed. You look and you need to decipher the need to stop. It takes you time to reach for your brake, and then it also takes time for your car to brake. So that's what we were short, and that's why it was decided to temporarily close Sandy Run. Yeah. So the roundabouts that you see out there on Edgewood Road, they were actually put in to provide interim access to Sandy Run. So this one here is, I believe, Mill. What we recommended to the township was the most dangerous or hazardous condition was when people would make a left in and out of Sandy Run, given the sight distance that was there. So we recommended, in order to provide interim access, to eliminate the lefts in and out of Sandy Run. Those were the higher risk movements with the limited sight distance. But we needed to give an option for people to make that left turn move. So the roundabout that you see at Schuyler Drive today, it was convenient because the intersection was pretty wide, so it wasn't all that expensive for us to do this. But if you wanted to make a left out of Sandy Run, you can make it right on the Edgewood Road, come through the roundabout, and go back past Sandy Run towards the township building. And likewise, if you wanted to make a left off of Edgewood Road onto Sandy Run Road, we recommended this mini roundabout at Mill Road so that you would go past Sandy Run, go around the Mill Road roundabout, and come back and make a right turn into Sandy Run. So this is the aerial of the three. We were conveniently had these intersections that worked in our favor that we could work with to provide those left turn movements. Let's see if I can. So the project was open September 2021. There was a lot of noise when it was first opened. People were surprised, didn't know what to expect. One of the things we recommended was putting out 15-mile-per-hour advisory speeds with some temporary flashers, get people's attention that there was something different out there. The good news was I remember I mentioned the speeds was 37 miles per hour. We were able to reduce it down to 34 miles per hour. Certainly not down to what we'd want, closer to 25, but much better than it was before the mini roundabouts went in. So so that we still do have a shortfall, so to speak, of sight distance. All right. I'm having trouble moving my slide. I don't know if it's because. That went back instead of forward. Oh, here we go. All right, so what we did was we collected some data after the roundabouts were open to see how it was in operation. We waited a couple of weeks to let people digest it a little bit. You can see here, the way a roundabout works, the person in the roundabout has the right of way. That vehicle there just attempted to stop to allow the person coming in the right of way. So this was, we had the same learning curve on a roundabout close to my home. And right now it's almost never happens. The people realize that they have the right of way once they're in the roundabout. The other thing we're seeing here, people are cheating over the brick pavers because it's pretty simple to do that. You know, ideally we would have something more like mountable or physical to keep them from doing it. So here's another example, somebody waiting when they actually have the right of way. This person coming up is actually waving them on, insisting that. And that's literally what I did on a roundabout down the road from my house. I mean, eventually people get it. So the numbers were pretty good. There still is some learning curve, I imagine, but I'm pretty satisfied with the way they're operating. This is the Mill Road roundabout. You see, you really need to get around coming from the railroad tracks towards the township building. There are situations there. There's a person using it for a U-turn, and here's a person using the island. So again, it's intended to be driven over, most specifically for trucks, but people, you know, will do that. But by and large, the operations at the mini roundabouts, I'm satisfied with what I'm seeing. I haven't heard any complaints from the chief, so we're thinking they're working pretty good. So regarding the shortfall of sight distance, we already recommended to the Public Works Director to install an intersection warning sign. I believe we asked for a distance plaque. I mean, the speed limit's already posted for 25. So if you're speeding, at least we're also telling you there's an intersection coming up 250 or 300 feet, whatever the plaque says. And last thing, one of my engineers came up with a recommendation, and I really like it. The Federal Highway about 5 to 10 years ago came up with this high friction surface treatment. So it's something you put on the road to increase your tire's ability to grip when you're putting your brakes on and stopping. Likewise, it helps you to get around a curve, and PennDOT and across the country to use it for that kind of safety feature too. My engineer took a look at the amount of high friction surface treatment that will be required for people coming over the railroad tracks. If they see somebody need to stop, it's just in that area, you know, on the immediate approach to Sandy Run, and it would be about $14,000. And so how does this work? It's basically like a high-tech kind of glue you put on the road surface, and you put these for a jagged kind of rigid material that gives you better braking ability. And it's expensive. Like, in other words, why don't we do it everywhere? It's very expensive to do. But when you have a location where you really feel the need to get that braking distance down, it's a very good option. So in this particular case, you can see on the screen, we can, even though people are still traveling well over 25 miles per hour, we have them down like 34. If we put this treatment on the road, we believe it would be equivalent to getting people to drive 25 miles per hour. And in my mind, we can consider this a permanent treatment, and we don't need to move on to any more treatments for Sandy Run. We can consider it a permanent solution. And with that, I'll open it up to the board. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Just a quick question for you. And I've seen them in different spots where they're it's almost like a digital speed limit sign that also serves as a radar. It tells you how quick you're going versus what the posted speed limit is. How effective are those?
They are. I'd have to look into that. I mean, I'm sure you can get some reductions there. It's, but I'm not. Sometimes you actually have the opposite effect. Imagine when you were 16, 17 years old, and you know, I'm going to see what I can get this number up to. You know, I hate to say it, but there is that caution. But
yeah, just to follow up on that, they're effective for a short period of time until people get used to seeing them up there, and then they just ignore them like a sign.
So the initial thing is there.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think what Joe had said, he mentioned that you said that it's being this roundabout has calmed.
Oh, it has. Yes, it has. Now that the adjustment period is over for the public, I've seen no accidents. We get no complaints any longer inside our administrative office, and it seems to be working quite well.
Excellent. Good.
That's
All
good.
right, that's all I have. I'll open it up to some supervisors if they have any other questions about the presentation. We'll start with Supervisor Blundy.
Yeah, thank you. Joe, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. When you measured the speed so that the 85th percentile was low, but not as low as we had hoped, that's the space after the Mill Run circle, but before you come to Sandy Run, that people are getting their cars back up to 34?
Right, yeah, the sight distance problem is coming over the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
So it's that speed coming down from the tracks towards Sandy Run.
Yeah, I mean, put down the glue. I think we as a township and as neighbors and residents, right? Like I'm teaching my third kid how to drive. Gotta start taking blood pressure medicine. And I am keenly aware of how much we're all speeding. And I don't mean 3 or 4 miles over the speed limit. I almost wonder if it's increased during COVID. People are, for whatever reason. So if this is what we have to do to make that area safe, because we've got a lot going on in that area, then I support it.
Thank you, Suzanne. Dan, do you want to have some feedback or questions like this?
Sure. Yeah, just a couple. And Joe, I won't make you talk too much because I know you're not feeling that great. Couple quick questions. I get out here a fair amount and kind of just, it's part of one of my loops and kind of observe what people are doing and whatnot. And the two issues that I noticed more than any, I guess, that made my hair on the back of my neck stand up, and hopefully for Chief's comments that's dying down, or at least people aren't doing it as much, is that at the Edgewood, and there seem to have been, this is all anecdotal of course, but at the Edgewood Schuyler roundabout, when you're coming down Edgewood heading east as you approach the roundabout, sorry, I'm looking at a map and acting like a car here. It seems like the approach is pretty straight, right? So heading east. So when things first started, and for at least several weeks afterwards, I would see people not stopping, just barreling through there because it was a straight shot, like it was a normal road. I know you've put down the pavers, and it's kind of like striping, hoping to get them mentally to go a different way. So my two concern, and I'll tell you the other one before I get into, and then my other concern is at a little different at the other one at Mill, either probably heading east more than west on Edgewood, but folks, because it's not a straight shot, I saw a lot of folks driving at almost full speed, amazingly, over the circle, and some of them looked like they were going to bottom out, but it didn't slow them down. So I'm wondering, this treatment, or which seems to have a similar effect, but a different approach than, say, rumble strips, for example. For those folks that continue to, because these are going to be applied to the roads, right? So I'm wondering about how we prevent people from driving right smack over the middle whenever they feel like it, to protect people there that might be, and get T-boned as they're coming through a roundabout and someone's coming through. How can we address that with this approach?
Well, it's funny because these are mini roundabouts, and the way they operate is we need to have the middle open, so a tractor trailer or a moving truck needs to be able to go over that. We did design them so that a school bus, for example, can go around without going over the median, but we can't put physical obstructions in there. And the other thing I think is leading towards what we're seeing here is, in the interest of cost savings, we had these skewed towards the side of the intersection to save us from spending too much money. But ideally, if you had a mini roundabout, just like a roundabout, you would be heading towards the center of the roundabout or mini roundabout, and it would be equal deflection to your right, regardless of what approach you're coming to. But because of, in the interest of keeping the cost down, and again, it was a temporary measure, I'm happy with it. I'm willing to consider it a permanent measure. That I think that's part of the reason. So when you come down Edgewood Road from the west, that is a straight shot. In fact, it's 45 miles per hour. And other than this roundabout and a speed limit sign, there's really no difference. So if they have the sun coming at their face or something like that, or they just, I don't know, driving somebody else's car, they don't care if they're bottoming out. You might see that. I don't know.
Rental cars. So is there, and I apologize because I'm not feeling so hot tonight too, so I may have missed this. Is there, are we just with this, the HFST stuff, is that strictly focused at Mill? Or are we also looking at doing that at Schuyler?
Actually, it's only at Sandy Run, because the problem that we were addressing, the reason the township closed Sandy Run is because when you came over to railroad tracks, if somebody was pulling out and you didn't have a reaction time and stopping distance, right? So now with the mini roundabouts, we brought it down a little bit, 34 miles per hour. But by putting this new surface on top of it, and I was told, by the way, my engineers tell me it should last as long as the surface would. So it's not like you got to go in and put it every other year. But when we do resurface the road, we'd have to re-put the high friction again, whenever that happens. But yeah, it's only to address people coming over the railroad tracks down the 10% grade towards Sandy Run while doing 37 miles per hour to give them more braking distance.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's great. I'm just, we need to do that. I'm just concerned about how we deal with those other two issues moving forward. Hopefully the treatment by Sandy Run will help the Mill Road circle. I'm still concerned about the Schuyler circle. And for any supervisors that are interested, Federal Highway has a nice, FHWA has a nice write-up on this stuff and speaks highly of it. So it sounds like a very successful approach for what it is and what it's to be used for. So that sounds good. I'm not trying to get off topic. One of my bigger concerns about the whole setup is at Schuyler. So like something to consider in the future as we get more data.
We could, again, I hate if Greg Cucklebridge was in the room, he'd strangle me, but you could put like a temporary marker, like delineators that can be run over. You can mount them so the truck can still do it. But again, I hate to do it because, they're going to get hit and it'll be a mess all over the place. But again, if you want, we could throw the cameras out there again. What we saw was a pretty high compliance rate. And I'm pretty satisfied with it. You're always going to have that outlier who's going to do something silly.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that people are learning and following the rules, and people are people, right? It's just that's the one thing I see, that if people are behaving and following the rules, then it's not a problem. But when they're not, if they're coming in at those speeds, it could be that's the one thing that scares me out there is that. But I don't want to get off topic, but more data will tell us more about what we might need to do in the future if it truly is an issue or not. But anyway, thank you for your presentation, Joe. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Joe, maybe as a follow-up, we can maybe do cameras if we do this other, after we do this other application that you're talking about, just to kind of get a before and after of what it looked like, if you think that that's a good idea.
Again, for the roundabouts. I mean, if you guys are seeing more, strange behavior, we'll be happy to do it. I'm satisfied with it. But again, if complaints are coming in, if you're noticing it, we'd be happy to put them out there and quantify it. But I was pretty satisfied with the compliance rate, which was only maybe 2 weeks after it was open. So hopefully it's even better now.
Yeah, and we'll just monitor that, and maybe Chief will give us some feedback if he gets that information. Excellent. So out of nowhere, he appears. Supervisor Lewis, you have any questions for Joe?
Joe, thank you very much. Yeah, let the record reflect that I was it took 10 minutes.
Transit. Did you rip through the?
No, I
the
didn't
roundabout?
violate
Okay.
any
All right, good.
speed limits
Good.
on my way here. A couple quick things. To the best of your knowledge, we haven't had any accidents or fender benders on any of the roundabouts, correct?
That's correct.
So that's excellent news, right?
Great news.
And the more I talk to people about it, the concerns they have are it forces them to be observant, right? And that's what they don't like about it when they're driving, that they actually have to be engaged. And that's why they're effective and they work. So I've been generally very pleased with the uniqueness of the design and that it seems to have solved the problem, which from a design perspective was very vexing. Tend to be pretty supportive of what I read as far as the addition of the pavement for sticky. I don't know how I want to describe it. The sealant or stickiness, the Fred Biletnikoff stickum for those old school football folks. So yeah, no, I read through the whole report and this is one of the things I'm generally very excited by the outcome on this. And I think others should be as well. I know so many times you think, well, government's never going to open that road. So many people said that, man, we opened the road and it's working and there's no accidents. That doesn't mean we can't be vigilant and we should continue, but this is definitely a great story. And that's all I had.
Thank you, John. Supervisor Weiss? Thank you, John. Supervisor Weiss?
I like the idea of the arresting material put on the road towards Sandy Run from the railroad tracks. It's something that the airports have been using for years to help stop jets, and it is very effective. The name of the game from day one was to get the speed down to around 25 miles an hour. If we can do it with this surface material instead of using chicanes, believe me, I'm all for it. So, Joe, I appreciate the research and I appreciate the very novel use of this material for this purpose. And thanks for being so good.
Awesome.
Just-
Kurt, looks like you want to.
Just to clarify,
Sure.
the material won't be slowing vehicles down. They'll be stopping in a distance equivalent to if they were doing 25. They're still going to be doing 34, plus or
If
minus.
they have to brake, they can brake.
Right.
Yeah, the effective braking distance becomes as if they were going 25.
Right. Exactly.
Excellent. Kurt, you wanted to add something?
Just a couple things for the board. First, Joe, I think in that estimate, we had talked that the treatment would be like $26,000 estimated, correct?
I think it was 14,000. It was, is what, okay. And the other thing is, I didn't mention, PennDOT has a statewide program to apply this high friction surface treatment. And if we can get on to their schedule, it's kind of like co-stars where you're paying less because you're buying more. We can get PennDOT's contractor to do it at a much lower rate than if we bid it out ourselves.
So in the end, even if they couldn't, it does not fall into the category necessarily of having to have a formalized bid process. We could go get quotes provided that they came in that range of under $20,000 or so. But for the board's perspective as well, this is not something that we budgeted for. However, you do have two different pots of money. You have the bond proceeds money that is sitting there that we actually used last year to do the project in general, that I think is still an appropriate application of those funds. And you have rescue plan money that we talked about as well. Either way, one way or the other, that is perfectly within the confines of township code, even though that was not part of the budget to use either of those pots of money. It doesn't affect the general fund. Either of those, I think, are explainable, and I could make an argument for either, but that money is there for you if you decide to do it.
Do we need to make a motion for that?
Well, I mean, I would think at this point, you could do a motion to proceed, and then we would sit and proceed and come up with what the options for you would be. If it's PennDOT can do it, and we can do that as part of a process, we can approve that. If we have to go get 3 quotes, we could do that as well. I would say if you wanted to do a motion to proceed with the options to enable this to happen, that would empower Joe to go out and see what's out there.
Yeah, do I hear a motion to proceed with this strategy?
So moved.
I'll
Second.
Oh, lots there. So Dan made the motion. It was seconded by Fred. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Opposed? So the motion to, sure, Dave.
You all may have public comment on the issue.
My apologies. You always have to remind me of that. Is there any public comment on the Buck site
Or on Sandy Run for that.
or on Sandy Run? None heard. So our vote is 5-0. So thank you, Joe. I guess you will work with Kurt to get us the best deal on that material.
We'll make sure we report back status if we need to come back. If it
Sure.
requires board action, and we'll make sure we communicate. Thanks.
Sure.
Oh, we'll reach out to PennDOT tomorrow and make sure we don't miss the boat if it's available.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving
Better.
along to agenda item number 9, I believe we have a special guest here, Mr. Stedman, who's going to be giving us a presentation. Just to give some background on Mr. Stedman's presentation, last year, the board, we came together and said that we wanted to do an ad hoc committee to take a look at the different assets of the township, specifically, some of the farmstead at Patterson Farm. And Mr. Stedman and his colleagues have been putting in some really good work the last 6 or 8 months or so. And the township really, really appreciates the expertise of Mr. Stedman and all those involved. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dennis. And I think you have a cool presentation for us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Is my screen visible and can you hear me all right?
Move the mic a little.
Yeah, move it a
closer.
little closer. There you go.
That better? Thank you.
Perfect.
Well, as I said, it's a pleasure to be here representing the ad hoc property committee. Thank you. We set out to get you recommendations by the end of the first quarter, and here we are on March 2nd, so it's a pleasure. Just to introduce myself, Dennis Stedman. I'm a resident of Lower Makefield Township for 34 years. I serve on the Lower Makefield Farmland Preservation Board. In terms of background, I grew up on a Pennsylvania farm. I've worked in barns just like the barns there. I've shoveled corn out of the corn cribs just like the corn cribs there. I have a love, appreciation, and knowledge of what works. I've backed tractors and farm implements in and out of those barn and on those hills. I know what's involved. My undergraduate degree is in agricultural business, and my master's degree is in agricultural economics. I've spent 40 years in the agribusiness industry in various capacities around the world. So just in terms of background, when we comes to agriculture, I have some firsthand knowledge. We were charged back when this committee was formed in July by you, the supervisors, and you gave us 5 charges, 5 assignments. Identify, assess, and analyze the township properties as directed by you. You directed us to the Patterson Farm, which has 15 buildings and 2 farmsteads, and to the Slack House at Makefield Highlands. The committee worked diligently on that. You wanted us to identify potential uses and reuses of the property, establish preservation, rehabilitation efforts needed consistent with those uses, to conduct financial review and analysis of and costs associated with those, including revenue, rent, and sale. The Board of Supervisors was very clear. You told our committee everything's on the table. And then you asked us, 5th, to prioritize those buildings to be addressed by the township, by your board. Let me just say, after learning what I've learned in the last 7 or 8 months about Patterson Farm, which was certainly much more than I did, I applaud this board for giving this assignment to a volunteer committee of this community. It is time for something to change. We are at a crossroads, I believe, at Patterson Farm in particular, and all the properties. And so I have no interest in looking back and thinking about who did what 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It has no bearing on today. We're looking at what exists today and what makes sense for this community moving forward. And that's the attitude that the committee has taken. The committee is made up of these volunteers: Fred Childs, who is with me here this evening; Beth Sovini, who is our secretary; Sarah Dobert; James Nice; John Mohan; and Jim Scott. And I want to thank them for their effort over the past really 8 months. By way of introduction, very briefly, the Slack House at Makefield Highlands, you can see here, it's an historic stone structure, very attractive, majestic structure. And this is a circa 1760s building. It is unoccupied, it is unused. We believe in, when we look at historical significance of this, there could be a direct tie between this, the resident of this house, and someone who was in George Washington's boat that Christmas night in 1776. So this could be historically quite significant. When we turn to the Patterson farm, there are 2 farmsteads on this 221 beautiful acres, comprised of 183 acres that are preserved farmland. That's a deed easement with Bucks County for perpetuity, that it will stay in farmland. That's important. There's 34 or 38 acres not in that easement, most likely for very good reason, because of the farmsteads and some wetlands. But it's a beautiful property. In addition, it has 2 ponds. It has 2 springs, actually. This wetland starts right here where my cursor is. There's a very active spring there. And only during wet seasons does a second higher spring kick in, just a little bit downstream from that. There is no stream up here. So all that water starts roughly where my cursor is. There's wooded area, of course. There's a greenhouse parcel, which is in the process of being dismantled and restored back to its original condition. And we believe that the Patterson farmstead most likely contains the oldest house in Lower Makefield Township, which we'll talk some more about. In order to understand the Patterson farm, we've developed a key for the buildings. We numbered them to help us keep them straight. There's on the Satterswaith farmstead, there is the main house, the Satterswaith house, which we've all can see from Mirror Lake Road and S1. There's a well garage, which is literally where the well and the well pump is located, along with other activities. A small barn, very big barn. We have 2 classic Pennsylvania bank barns that allows the farmer to drive into the 2nd floor. This is the first one, the Satterswaith barn. There is a dilapidated corn crib back when corn was harvested on the cob, not as it's harvested since 1960s. And we have a small tool shed that the township uses. This large area here, you can see, is where the leaf mulch process goes on for the township. That's an important activity that goes on seasonally on the farm. The Satterswaith house is presented here. The Patterson farmstead is a bigger farmstead, 9 buildings, dominated by the Jenny Brown house here, as we labeled P2. Won't go through every building other than to say that this caretaker house, caretaker cottage, which is buried in these trees in the photograph, is a very small dwelling, and our colleagues at the Historic Commission believe is the oldest house in not only Lower Makefield Township, potentially in Bucks County, and one of the oldest houses potentially in Pennsylvania. So just we want to call particular attention to that. Again, a very large Pennsylvania bank barn being damaged by this very large tree, which is in the barn hill and too close and shading the roof and all those things, not in great condition, and a number of outbuildings. So how do we go about trying to decide some priorities and how to analyze this? The committee took the following approach. We said we have to balance three important goals. First, preserve history, preserve agriculture. That is absolutely a given and important. Also important is we have to have community use and community support, because this is not just a property for one owner, a township to own and without any community use or benefit. And the township's going to need community support. If you want support, it needs some use. And the third leg of this wheel is fiscal responsibility. We have to make things that make financial sense. If I approach this wheel from any one of these three directions, and I'm myopic on that topic, all the decisions are easy. But these are not easy decisions. We have to look at this all in balance. And I know there's some people have the attitude that only one thing counts and not another. Money doesn't matter, it's only history, or history is the only, or money is the only thing that matter and we can't save it. No, it has to be balanced. And that's what this committee has worked hard to do. So just a very quick high-level factual summary, 16 buildings on 2 sites. Our recommendations are driven by historical significance, farming, use options, whether they be private or community, and cost and revenue. When we look at those 4 factors, most of these factors we've very quickly you conclude are driven by the 4 houses that are involved. 3 houses on Patterson Farm and the Slack House on Makefield Highlands. The barns, the outbuildings, very important, but they're always going to be secondary, tertiary to the houses. The houses will drive the cost, it'll drive the value. There's a wide range of conditions of these houses. 2 of them have been in active use, the Janney House and the Caretaker House as art studios, and they're usable. Doesn't mean they don't need work. They're very usable. They're occupied. The 2 that are unoccupied today are in very bad condition. There's a lesson there. We conducted real estate assessment for the highest and best uses of the 2 unused buildings. And I'll give you a high-level summary of that. I've said the Patterson Farm, the 183 preserved farmland acres, generates about $25,000 a year in rental income. The Janney House and the Historical Committee is recommending, and we're passing that recommendation on to you, would be more properly named the Joseph Yardley House. That generates a rent of about $13,500 a year, plus the tenant pays utilities, because keeping it heated is important to its maintenance, and some very light maintenance, painting and other type of activities. Caretaker Cottage is being recommended that be renamed the Tuna Cliff Cabin as a more accurate name, going back to 1693 ownership by John Tunacliffe. And that generates income of about $5,000 per year. Satterswaith House, excuse me, circa about 1830. There's an older section that may be from the 18th century. It's unused, it's abandoned, and it's in, there's no other word, horrible condition. The Slack House, 1760, unused, and as I said, maybe a direct link to Washington. So when we look at our recommendations, there were 3 fundamental principles that we tried to embrace. Number 1, it's fundamental that Patterson remains in agriculture. To us, it's a given. It's a top priority. There's no debate or question about staying in farming. Not only are there 183 acres of rich soil that are preserved for perpetuity, but it's also important open space. It's a farm setting. It's a farm aesthetic. It distinguishes our community from other communities. When you get off of 295 and you see the barns and the buildings and the cornfields and the soybean fields, that changes our community. We believe that's important. We know most of the community believes that. So there's no question there. There also must be other uses in order to preserve and maintain these buildings. These buildings cannot be used strictly for agriculture. They're obsolete. They were built 100 years ago. I think agriculture's changed a little bit since then. Today, the farmer we have as a tenant farms 1,000 acres in Bucks County and needs 1,000 acres to barely make it. It used to be you could make a living on 200 acres. It's not possible. It's just not possible. I'm sorry. So we have to have other uses, and we want those other uses designed purposely to minimize any interference with farming, because farming is the top priority, given. 2, preserve historic buildings. The township, together with community support, should do everything they can to preserve these important legacies. These are important buildings, some more important than others, and there's analysis to be done there, but it's part of our fabric, it's part of our community. We have a rich history in this area, contributing to Bucks County and the country, and we want to maintain that. It's part of our community character, without a doubt. And the Pennsylvania State Historical Preservation Office has determined that both farmsteads, the Satterswaite Farmstead and the Patterson Farmstead, are eligible for listing on the National Register. Now, I said the farmstead because it could be that the farmstead, the collection of buildings, is historically more important than any one individual building by itself. Because an individual building, its significance is going to be driven by unique architecture, some unique event, significant event that happened there, or a significant individual that lived there in history. Not all the buildings can check all those boxes, but maybe the farmstead can. So I think we want to keep a note of that. The third element is, without a purpose, a building is dead. It's just a given. It can't be maintained if it doesn't have a use. We're not going to restore or renovate buildings and then figure out what to do with them. That's a waste of money. It insults me as an economist and, more importantly, as a taxpayer. So we have to find active uses that support these remaining in repair. They need to generate some revenue to at least contribute to that maintenance. There's none of these that are going to be profit makers. Slack House may be an exception, but they need revenue just to contribute to their livelihood. The example is the Joseph Yardley House and the Tuna Cliff Cabin. They've been in continuous use, and they're not our problems. The houses that have no use is where the problems are. So this guided our decisions. So our recommendations. We're recommending a multi-phased plan to both these properties, Patterson Farm in aggregate and the Slack House at Makefield. And it needs to be a joint township community effort. And we're seeing the first phase being comprised of five elements. Number 1, develop a comprehensive overall Patterson Farm master plan that considers multiple uses and clean up the site and clean out the buildings. There's been a lot of refuse that just accumulated from the township or public works or various places, old tenants in these buildings that make them unusable, even if they were in a condition to be used. It needs to be cleaned up and cleaned out. It needs to be treated, quite frankly, with a little more respect. With a master plan, it'll improve the harmony of these multiple uses and assure the fact that we can have farming, maintain the farm aesthetic, maintain the proper environmental stewardship through those delicate areas, and still have public uses. There's no conflict there. It just needs to be planned. So far, what's happened on Patterson Farm, for whatever reason, doesn't matter. It's been haphazard. It's been leased out to a farmer. He's been told, if you can use a building and not get in anybody's way, help yourself. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. One tenant sits down and starts using it. The driveways are where they are, the garages are where they are, the parking is where it is. Another tenant starts to use it. There hasn't been a plan. We're recommending a master plan be developed. And that part of that master plan is the evaluation of nominating these properties for placement on the National Register. But I say evaluation. It's not, let's rush out and do that. Let's measure, let's take a measure, let's get a plan, let's know what the buildings are going to be used for, how they're going to be treated, and then make our applications. The second element of our first phase is we've identified 3 clear priorities. Number 1, the Tuna Cliff Cabin. We think it ought to be restored to its period status. It's the oldest house in LMT. It's the original house on this property. And we're recommending that the township work closely with the Historical Society and Historical Commission to verify the ages. There's some studies that ought to be done to confirm the age estimates that we have now from the Historical Commission. They're not expensive, but they need to be funded. And develop restoration plans and grant submissions. That cabin which should be eligible, will be eligible for state historical grants and other governmental body grants that would offset its expense. If there's a historical gem on Patterson, this is the gem. It also carries the advantage of being small, therefore not quite as expensive, and also used, so not in the worst condition. So it's a shorter path to take to restore this one historic building. Our second priority is the Satterswaith House. And what we're saying is we need to settle on a future use and settle on the funding. We're saying expend no significant dollars on that structure until the future use and the funding is agreed upon. And this is a tough one because this is the most expensive undertaking that we're going to talk about tonight. And that's why we shouldn't start unless we know how we're going to finish. And the third clear priority for us is to improve the Satterswaith main barn. The main barn, we spent a lot of time talking to the farmers. In addition to having some knowledge, we let the farmers speak. There's 3 buildings, maybe 4 buildings out of the 15 that they could make use of. The rest have no use to them. It doesn't matter. The main one is the Satterswaith main barn. It needs some structural reinforcement to carry the load of storage of equipment and tractors on the second floor and storage of straw on the second floor. They can use those hay mows and they can use that second floor of Satterswaith. And the Satterswaith barn is in much better condition than the Patterson main barn. And we'll talk about the cost of doing this. So when we talk about priorities, our second element, we've given you 3 priorities to work on. The third element is to work with our current tenants and reach potentially mutually agreeable new lease terms, reflecting new projects, new uses, new site plan, and the building conditions. That what has happened to date is kind of one-off deals. Now let's sit back in a more thoughtful, organized way and say, what does make sense? For the farming lease, specifically, their farm lease should include that they have access to use of and rights to the Satterswaith barn. The keys should be theirs. Same is true of the Satterswaith well garage, which they could make productive use of, and the equipment garage on Patterson. Now, maybe the pack house, a non-historical building on Patterson, that P8, is on a bubble. There's 2 uses for the pack house. The farmer could use it, and that's a tempting use, but so could the artist. We'll come back to that. But at least those 3 buildings should be built into the agricultural lease with the current tenant, but also recommend a 10-year term lease for in agriculture, which is not uncommon. For example, in order to decompose mulched leaves, it takes at least 3 years for that to become rich in the soil. if my lease is expiring in 3 years, the last thing I'm going to do is put leaves on there because I won't see any benefit until year 4. In addition, whenever I put mulch leaves on, I have to add a lot of lime because the ground gets too acidic. I got to sweeten it. So it's very expensive. A 10-year lease helps that kind of stewardship, that kind of decision-making, rather than short-term decision-making. And to consider modifying the leaf mulching operations so that all of the leaves that get collected throughout Lower Makefield Township end up enriching the Patterson farmland. There's a certain harmony to that that just is hard to deny. And I think it's worthwhile. And there's no reason those economics can't work. The lease for the AOI Art Center in the Joseph Yardley House, we're saying that is a true asset to the community. They've been very successful, put hundreds of families, thousands of students through art programs there over the years. We're recommending an expansion of the Art Center and expansion of art on the Patterson farm. History, agriculture, and art are very compatible, very compatible. Those just work in harmony. They complement each other. And I think looking at an expansion of an art center there just makes tremendous sense. We would do that in a way to plan and organize so that it's not interfering with farming, the first mission, and include consideration of the first garage, P5, as well as maybe the pack house to be renovated into art studios. That's TBD, that's to be determined, but those are things to talk through. C, the lease with the Tuna Cliff Cabin tenant to explore maybe other opportunities to keep that artist on the farm, maybe the first garage, maybe not, but we need to sort that out if that house is going to be completely renovated. The tenant obviously will have to be served notice, and it's a month-to-month lease. Public Works has some space there. They would be assigned the tool shed, that C6 back behind the Patterson main barn, and maybe the pack house, because if the pack house is going for farm use, they're only using it in the harvest season primarily, and Public Works can store equipment there in the winter when the farmer's not. So there could be a dual seasonal use to that pack house. The fourth element of this first phase is then to stabilize those buildings not prioritized. There are certain near-term things that just ought to be done to kind of stop the loss, to halt the demise, the deterioration. The two most expensive elements of that is going to be the Joseph Yardley house. There's work needed on the roof of the dormers and the Patterson barn. Those two are going to be the largest expenses you're going to face, and we'll show you the numbers in a moment. We're also recommending spend no significant funds on either corn crib on the two sites or the small barn on Satterswaith. Those are gone. I mean, the Satterswaith corn crib was recommended to be demolished in 2014, and Mother Nature's almost got it done by now. So that they're just, they won't serve a purpose. There's no purpose. The fifth and final element then that we're recommending to the Board of Supervisors is to create a Patterson Farm Oversight Board to support this necessary vision, site planning, management, landlord-tenant relationships, activities, and to foster a continuous community input, dialogue, and support. We're going to need support to rebuild these. We're going to need fundraisers. You're going to need historical organizations, art organizations. And the best way to do that is to help them manage that. And I think if there was an oversight board of community volunteers comprised of people with interest in history, interest in agriculture, interest in the environment, interest in all of these in parks and recreation, it would go a long way to managing this property better. And it's too complex a management for the township manager and the board of supervisors simply to do kind of on the side in addition to the more than full-time job that you already have. Any projects we're recommending, just a note, would require a detailed set of plans, cost estimates, and timelines. We have ballparks at this point primarily. These are pretty good ballparks, but they're not detailed plans. And importantly, they all need to include the community and nonprofits in the area for potential partnership and fundraising. So the summary: phase one, develop a comprehensive farm master plan and site cleanup. Top priorities: restore the Tuna Cliff cabin, settle on the future use of Satterswaith and secure the funding, rehabilitate the Satterswaith farm barn for farm use, review and reach potentially new terms with all the tenants, near-term stability, and then establish the farm oversight board. After that, phase two, we could build on that progress and the multiple lessons I'm sure we will have learned to then address the second tier priorities, which are most likely the Patterson main barn, the pack house, some other outbuildings, maybe traffic flow. Part of that farm master plan may call for a 2-lane driveway going in and out off of Mirror Lake Road so that we minimize any car traffic that's using the Satterswaith driveway, which is where most of the farming activities will be. Things like that. We can execute in phase two after we get through phase one. And in phase three, hopefully we'll achieve the full realization of the vision with cooperation of LMT and community organizations. So the costs of this, just a first row of a table. The phase one, we're recommending a master site plan. And then in each case, we want to evaluate how does it fit with our historical agricultural preservation? How does it fit with community use? How does it fit within our fiscal responsibility? So the master plan will help assure that the farmstead preservation and public use occur. We need to plan it. We can't be haphazard. Community use, absolutely. The community will get to use it. The cost, the conceptual plan, about $15,000, $20,000. A fully engineered plan, about $75,000 can be done. What are the other phase one priorities? Tuna Cliff cabin, absolutely. It's restored. The community can use it for historical education. We have a contractor estimate that could range from $150,000 to $350,000. And there's always going to be a range in these old buildings. You never know what you're going to find when you open something up, and you can never count on luck. The only luck you can count on is the old Irishman's luck that said if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. So when you start working on these buildings, you know what's going to happen. The Satterswaith house, if it can be saved, is on the brink. This is on the edge. I can't mince words. If it can be saved, the highest and best use we can come up with is a township building for township office, public works, parks and recreation, something. The real estate assessment was very clear. You're never going to be able to sell that even for $1 for any kind of residential purchase. It's not in the offing. A commercial office, no. It's an awkward building at best. It's a 60-40 duplex, and it's the only building that's framed. It's wood. The others are stone. They're less of an issue. It's hard to unrot wood. We have an estimate that ranges from $1.5 to $2.5 million to renovate that house and make it suitable for offices. The Satterswaith main barn, it can be preserved. It could be used for farming. Our estimate, pretty detailed estimate from the engineer, is $110,000. Some other phase one priorities, the well house is in good shape. We can turn that over to the farmer. The equipment garage needs about $80,000 for farming use. The stabilization of all 7 other buildings is about 410. Bottom line is holding the Satterswaite House off to the side. We're looking for phase 1 at an expense of about $1 million, $950,000. And Satterswaite is the big bubble. That's going to be the tough one. Can the township and community commit to that kind of spending for that kind of use? And maybe there's another use that we haven't thought of, but we've gone around the barn on that. Just to show you that there is detail there for the other 7 that add up to that 410. Some of them are smaller than others, but it would stabilize those and stop the loss, stop the deterioration. We don't have estimates for phase 2, of course. We have to get through phase 1, but you can't make a recommendation or make decisions about what's best to do in phase 1 without some vision of what's next, what phase 2 might be. So this tries to summarize those recommendations of the likely phase 2 projects. The Patterson first garage, maybe $150,000 to make that into an art studio. The pack house, which is non-historic, if it's used in ag, all they need is it cleaned out. It really doesn't need anything. They just need it cleaned. If it's used as, and there's also no revenue associated with that because they can't afford to pay more. If it's converted to an art studio, estimated about $350,000 expense, and they could generate revenue and rent that would pay the township back that in about 10 years. So there's a trade-off on that one. The Patterson main barn will be very expensive, depending upon the use. You can't begin to estimate how much it will be until you know what you want to do with it, but it's going to be a lot. It's structurally not that sound. The first floor is riddled with temporary pillars of cement blocks and beams just to stabilize it. And that's going to be a big project. To execute the master plan, maybe to put in a double driveway, maybe public utilities go in there, sewer and water, to support these uses at some stage in the second stage. We're looking at maybe a $300,000 spend. And we would just note to the supervisors that cost estimates are estimates. There's always surprises. And also, none of these cost estimates include potential offsets from grants that very well could be available. You're usually matching grants, but you could get some significant dollars to offset these expenditures. Any grants are going to be for the construction or the planning of construction. It won't be for the operation. So you got to get that grant up front, not later. So what does the Patterson farm then look like by our recommended uses? The green circles are farming uses. So the well house at Satterswaite, the main barn at Satterswaite, certainly this equipment garage at Patterson are all dedicated to the farm, and we're recommending that be added into the farm lease. There's a potential for the farm use of the pack house, and that's why it's kind of a mixed color. The community uses are in blue. The Joseph Yardley house, the Tuna Cliff cabin, the tenant garage, which is already in blue, if you will, and then the dotted ones are for phase 2. So we could see this art center kind of community use. There's an overall site plan that would tie all of this together, that would help with maybe some of the traffic and farm equipment flows, because these acres are precious, and the tenant needs easy access to them, and we're committed to maintain that. The pink circles are buildings that on phase 2 would probably be dismantled if you were asking us today. Maybe we'll learn something different when we get to phase 2, but those are very expensive to repair, and have no envisioned use. So for the Patterson recommendations, if I were to try to summarize those, I would say it's going to be used in agriculture. We're going to respect certainly the preserved farmland. None of these activities encroach anywhere near the preserved farmland. That can only be for farming. The 38 acres that are not preserved are not at risk because we're developing a plan to be sure that they're not. Right now, the haphazard behavior is more apt to be a risk environmentally than an organized plan. We've seen the revenue that's being generated. It's about $43,000 a year. You saw what the costs are. It's a drop in the bucket. You can't expect the rent from these kinds of community uses or these farming uses to come close to paying for what is necessary to bring this into standard. We are recommending that there's a collaboration with the Historical Commission and try to move on the National Registry, and that we're trying to support the local farmer because there are only a handful of farmers in Lower Makefield Township, as we all know. There is actually only one who isn't a baby boomer like me, and we're not long for this world. There's only one under 40, and that's who's farming this farm. And I think we should bend over backwards to make it easy for them to survive, because farming in this township, suburban, congested township, is not easy, and it has its challenges. So without a farmer, we can't, I don't know what we would do with preserved farmland. It would look like the Snipes parcel is what it would look like if we didn't have a farmer. We don't want that. That's the Patterson farmstead. Let me turn quickly to the Slack House. The Slack House at Lower Makefield, we're also recommending a multi-phase plan. The real estate assessment indicates that a public entertainment type of facility is clearly the highest and best use. Its location on the driveway of a golf course is not compatible for residential. There could be an office use, but it's a much lower value. Between a restaurant type of setting or a wedding venue type of setting, the larger event venue is by far the more attractive option, because the earning potential, the throughput of that kind of facility will help justify the type of investment that's necessary to bring it to bear. We're recommending in phase one, contract with a professional site and hold a site feasibility study to determine if such a venue, parking and the 18th hole and all those things are compatible. There's debates. Some people will say, I don't think you have room. Some people will say, yeah, we can make it work. We don't know. Nobody knows. We have to have an open mind. If it's a good utilization, let's do a site assessment and see what can be done. I'm told that the 18th hole can be rejiggered and reconfigured slightly, and with modifications here and there, it'll work. Maybe it won't. We should find out. If it is feasible to fit a wedding venue in behind the Slack House, associated with the Slack House, properly structured and designed to fit that setting, then we could conduct a detailed engineering assessment of what it would cost to renovate the Slack House to that kind of use. And the idea is that the Slack House would be a preparatory suite, a bridal suite, where the wedding party could meet and do what wedding parties do, I guess, as part of this large wedding venue. And it's a historical setting, Bucks County, Lower Makefield. It would bring in a lot of business. It would bring in a lot of revenue. And the township, I think, would have a source of revenue for a long time with the right professional operator. That's what's key. So the second phase is the township, if it wants to move forward, would then issue RFP to high-quality area operators soliciting bids, confirming the economics, long-term lease, long-term investments, et cetera. Review the proposals. If accepted, execute the plan. And then the third phase would be manage the third-party tenant operator and manage the financial returns. So this is the area we're talking about. The Slack House, the site concept and the house assessment would cost about $65,000 to get that stage done before you're in a position to really make a decision. Do we want to pursue this and go down this path? The Slack House costs are somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million. So you need that throughput to pay that back. I've talked to a number of operators who say it's possible. It's not a slam dunk. It's not easy, but it's also not impossible. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to a lot of contributors to these recommendations, and in alphabetical order. Certainly all of our ad hoc property committee volunteers, they put in long hours on Zooms and walking properties and talking to various experts. Chance Worthington of Worthington Sagan Custom Builders spent a lot of time walking through their buildings, has a lot of experience in exactly this type of restoration, a lot of judgment that he shared. We had a number of guest experts, Helen Hines from our historical commission, not committee, Jeff Marshall, retired from the Heritage Conservancy, John Porter, Steve Bernard from New Hampshire Barn Preservation Alliance, Doug Miller from the Pennsbury Manor site administrator. He runs Pennsbury Manor, shed a lot of insight on what it takes to keep those things, that type of operation going. A museum, Jay Spaziano Real Estate, did a lot of work on assessing it. Certainly want to thank the LMT Historical Commission. Joe Camarada is the chair. The staff, Kurt, Greg, Janelle, Jim, Kate, you guys were terrific to work with, really always responsive and resourceful. We want to thank our supervisor liaisons. I know that we needed direction and we got it, but we also got a lot of free reign, and we appreciate that. Mike Atera from Spirit Golf. I want to thank all the public commentators during our meetings over the last 8 months. We've had a lot of comments, and they're all appreciated. And with that, I'd turn it over for questions and discussions with the supervisors.
Thank you so much. It was a very robust presentation with a lot of data. I know that, we got this probably today, pretty late in the day. So I know that a lot of us want to just digest the enormity of this. But the way that you presented it, the way that you broke it down, I think makes it, a lot easier for the supervisors to digest and for, the public to digest. So I really appreciate, and like I said before, I really appreciate your work and the committee's work on this.
Thank you.
I think we're going to kind of just do some high level questions rather than some specifics, because I think we're still kind of digesting it. I know the one thing that you had talked about with the Tuna Cliff house, that's currently being occupied.
Yes.
And the idea is that seems to be the one that is the most historical significance.
It's the most historic. It is the historic gem. It's the smallest, and it's in good condition. If the township wanted to restore a house to its original period, that would be your first choice.
Okay.
I see it. If we have the community activity at the art center, I can see that creating traffic for a historic home visit, a little tour, a little walkthrough, or historic commission and historic society can store materials there potentially. They can be docents there on weekends and support a tour, or maybe have a fundraiser,
Sure.
On a summer night kind of thing. I think it would be a precious asset. to the community.
I think the only question around that one would, for me specifically, would be, how is it that we get, because I know that there's speculation about the age and the historic and the significance of it.
Yeah.
What would be the best way for the township to actually be able to designate that house as the oldest home in Lower Makefield and
There's-
as you know, Bucks County?
Yeah, the historical commission did recommend that archaeological, architectural, and this long word, which is testing the age of the wood. There's a process where you can actually take samples from beams and various wood sources in the building and age it. And that's been recommended. And in fact, a nonprofit has said that they, if I understood them correctly, that they may be willing to pay for that kind of study. And I would recommend that, we're recommending that study on all three of the homes, so that we really do know the age. I mean, there's a lot of work been done to connect the dots and kind of tie that together, but it's not a certainty. So this kind of wood assessment would give you that certainty. And then we're recommending that be one of the first steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had around Satterwhite House was, I think that there was some engineering study done on it within the last 10 years or so. Is that right?
There's been several, and most of them were more in the context of, what do you have to do to keep it from falling down, not to renovate it? So, it was recommended you do this in the foundation or do that on the roof, but it's a patch quilt approach without an end goal. Well, maybe an end goal is not have it collapse, but and we're really recommending that should stop. Either we come up with accept the use and accept the cost and renovate it for that use, or stop pouring money into that, because it's and we debated a lot, the committee debated a lot about, what about stabilizing the Satterthwaite House until we get to that point where we're ready to pull that trigger. And we came to the conclusion, that's a piece of string with no second end. There's no place to kind of stop it. Everything, the foundation, the beams, the walls, the roof, there's no place to kind of start and stop at this point, which is unfortunate that it's in that condition. But again, it's wood frame. There aren't many houses that are wood frame, around that long.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate the committee's approach to, that the slide 6, as far as, preserving history and agriculture, the community use, and then the fiscal part of it. Because you're right, it's a culmination of all those components.
Yeah.
And it seems like Satterthwaite is definitely the one that is the most challenging out of all those, for sure. That's really all I had to say. I don't know if there's any other supervisors, if there's any comments, I would just ask to keep them brief. I think that we need to do a deeper dive, and I'm probably going to ask you to come back at some point once we have, some time to digest this and really kind of break it down, and maybe get some feedback from Kurt and his staff to see if there is some need for additional outside of here facilities for township. So with that being said, I will ask our participants at home. Suzanne, do you have anything to add? You're on mute.
Sorry,
Oh, there you go.
yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, James. So I won't go into questions right now, but I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Fred. I know you're back there someplace. Thank you to all of the members of the committee, because there's a lot of work that went into this, and it really, just really proud of our residents and what they did to try to help start the discussion on a really tough situation. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I'll kind of reiterate what you said, James. We talked about this a little bit before. I think generally we feel the same way. There's a lot to digest here. That's a good thing. That means you did a lot of work. The committee did a lot of work, and whenever the committee presents this amount of data, that means there's orders of magnitude more data that they had to go go and distill it down to this. So it's no small undertaking. I also actually, James, you picked up on something else I was thinking with the slide 6 with the wheel. I tend to think of it more like a 3-legged stool, because if any one of those is imbalanced, the chair's going to fall over, right? So I appreciate that metaphor they had there. I guess, Dennis, one of the things that I think you were alluding to, but I just want to make sure, is 100% agree and would promote any type of master plan for the area, because I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to needing a plan moving forward, a formalized plan that we can work to, because you need, in order to keep buildings and other areas from deteriorating at all, even more so than what they are, you need people in the buildings, using the buildings, keeping an eye on the buildings, so that upkeep can occur. But really, I think maybe even before the plan, and maybe this is part of the plan process, but almost looking at sort of a phase 0, where we're looking at, we did some studies, but the combination of the structural versus environmental versus the Section 106 studies, the dendroarchaeology that I think you were referring to, some of the other studies that have partially been done, maybe for some of the buildings, not all of them, partially been done for some of the grounds, not all of them, et cetera. I think it's really important that we know where we're starting from a baseline, so that that plan can be really, really well supported. But I think the ideas that you have up here are good ones. They're ones that we've talked about. Otherwise, I'm curious, the ideas about supporting agriculture long-term, and that being the #1 priority, completely agree. Extending the lease, I think, is a great idea. Some of the other ideas you put out there, I think, have a lot of merit. I'm just got to wrap my head around what they actually mean. I'm wondering that as part of this whole process, do we bring in the current farmer to get some of their ideas on potential impacts to operations? And when I say impacts, that's both positive impacts and potential negative impacts with some ideas. Have we been able to incorporate that, or would that be part of the plan moving forward to get some feedback from them?
Well, we've done that already. We have a dialogue with Sam and Tim Stewart of Charland Farms, and I sympathize with their circumstance, having a long time ago been a farmer myself, because you're always busy. Make hay when the sun shines is absolutely true. And, if a piece of equipment breaks down and puts you out of the field for a day, it can impact your whole season. So things have to run smoothly. And we're very, very focused on not interfering or slowing down or causing any hampering to that. Any idea in my book, at least, and the committee's book, has to be compatible with the farmer. And I've walked the farm and all those buildings with Sam and Tim and talked about what could or couldn't be done. And like I say, there are 4 buildings that literally would have some utility today to them farming. The rest are too small, too old, they're obsolete. And if you want to use them for agriculture, they're obsolete. Yeah. We want to keep them, but we have to find an alternative use.
Yeah. And the last sort of theme that I keep sort of thinking of with especially the farm facilities, but is the concept of dual use or multi-use. A lot of when we talk about, all these buildings are old, whether they're all considered historic by definition. And when I mean definition, I mean by regulatory definition or not. They're all old. They all have pretty cool features. So I'll be simple about it. So the concept of dual use, whether it's the Tunnicliffe house or however that one, where it's an artist studio, but we're talking about having an area for storage and materials. It it might be able to be both. You know what I mean? The Satterthwaite House someday could be both. It could be, I like the idea of a public works space as a sort of a administrative building north a little bit, so that we have folks that actually have some knowledge of building maintenance in a building with additional meeting space. That's intriguing to me. We've talked about that. But at the same time, it's a cool older building where you can still have, you can curate, to use a fancy word, you can curate some history there while still having an active use place, and maybe give, so we don't have to do one or the other, which I like that idea. And then on the outside, you know, we have those 38 acres where we're looking to do tree plantings along the riparian zone. We have some farming that going on there. One concept that is very, in my world, has become very popular right now is the concept of dual use solar production, also known as agrivoltaics, where you take a portion of that, not all 38 acres, but some portion of that, and you can put in solar panels, and you can actually actively have agricultural practices of different types underneath solar panels. It almost doesn't sound doable, but it's something that is actually pretty prolific right now in New Jersey and New England and in other places that have big solar programs. So I would encourage us, basically, I would encourage us to think about this as not necessarily a zero-sum game, because I know there are different folks that have different strong opinions about different types of uses, but to see where we can have multiple uses or dual uses so that we can promote both the historic, the agriculture, and potentially some other use that has a benefit to the township. But I would love, James, as you mentioned, I would love to dig into this some more. Have the group come back. This almost seems like a series of special meetings to me at this point, just the volume that they put ahead of us. But I really appreciate what you've all done, and I'm excited to see what we can do moving forward. And I'm sure we'll get lots of feedback to spur some other ideas too, both tonight and in the future. So thank you, Dennis, and the committee.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Fred, do you want to add anything?
As supervisor liaison to the ad hoc committee, I want to commend you and the group for the tremendous amount of work that you put in over these last few months. We had a lot to consider, and it's a big job. I mean, these are buildings that have been with us for a long time, and unfortunately for two of them, two major structures in this community, two gems, they are gems, two have languished for so many years. I'm glad that we're finally going to do something. And, you know, for this committee to focus in and help the board and the community figure out finally what to do, using your three pieces of pie, is laudable, and I appreciate it. And there's a lot of work for the board to now do to distill all this and make some decisions going forward. Hopefully, with your help, we will be able to make some decisions in the near future, allocate resources appropriately, and restore these gems back to where they should be.
Yeah.
And I'm not really too worried about use. We'll figure out a use, and we'll work accordingly to your recommendations. I'll actually articulate those recommendations, but everything in phases is fantastic, and I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the next steps. And as far as I'm concerned, this is something that we shouldn't just put on a burner and think about. We should actively start working on this now and take that time to really start the process going further with the help of you, the committee, the community, our professionals, grant writers, conservation groups. We've identified them. They're all willing to help. And I think we have the beginnings of a real plan that hopefully in my lifetime, we will see, you know, we'll see something good. I appreciate it, Dennis. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. John, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, first, huge thank you to all of the members. I know many of them, and this report, in addition to the PowerPoint, there's the backup report, which was awesome. just awesome. And there's a lot of stuff here, and I realized how much work you did and how you wrestled with some of your recommendations. I think there's a strong, really strong blueprint of how you've laid out the first set of things that we can do now to build and prepare as we resolve remaining issues and sort of prioritization, what we can do sooner. And I think there's enough here for us to, I know we have more work to do, to come back to say, hey, this is our plan for what we can do the remainder of this year, because we do have some flexibility. And this is what we should be doing for next year and laying that out. Because I've got a lot of questions, and we're going to have a lot of time for them in the future. But in general, there's just a lot of detail work here. I know the level of work that you guys all put into it, even in the stuff that you've done. So I think from that perspective, as a citizen, I thank you, all of you, for your hard work on this, and I really, really appreciate it. And the best way I know to say thank you is to take your recommendations and use them so that a year or 2 years from now, you say, yeah, I did X, right? And that's the way I want to say thank you to you guys. Rest assured, I will read all 308 pages. Many of them I've read before because they're appendices, but still, I want to thank you for that. And I'm hopeful with the chair's guidance and ability, we can put some of these things up for discussion in this year. That's all I have for now. But again, you know, Dennis, I know we'll ask more questions.
Sure. And thank you all. I mean, I think it is important to note the point that you're making. We have to take these are concepts. This is a volunteer committee. We have concepts. They have to be translated into specific plans, timelines, dollars, et cetera, and then executed. So we have some more steps to take before we can begin to execute, but I think we need to begin to execute. I think the time is ripe, and this committee believes that, you know, hopefully we can chart kind of the beginning of a new course for Patterson Farm, because it's been a problem for the township and the community for a long, long time. There's no secret in that. Let's grab it, put our arms around it in a specific way, and begin to plan our way out of that. And I think we can eat this elephant a bite at a time, a phase at a time. I'm convinced.
Oh, thanks again.
James,
Yes.
Just real quick. So we will get on the website, the PowerPoint presentation. You all got a report from Mr. Stedman today, as he politely indicated to me right before he went on. The version that is finalized will say final. I think yours said draft, and he made those changes. And I had a chance to get them to you with the intent of obviously letting the public see these. They're big documents, so we'll get them on a site that someone can sit and pull them down. And we'll work to have that all done before the end of the week, probably tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dennis, again, thank you for your efforts. Thanks to the committee. Thanks, Fred. I think that there's a couple of members I want to acknowledge. There's anybody want to speak? Public comment regarding this? Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't mind just using that mic. Oh, there you go. You know, just state your name and address for the record. You're good. Thanks, Dennis.
All right. Donna Doan, 2814 Langhorne Yardley Road. Nice to meet you, Dennis, a person. We had a very exciting phone call for about 2 hours. We talked about the farm and disagreed, and we agreed. And I just want to say thank you, Dennis, for all your work. I hear good things, and I'm glad to hear good things tonight. For a long, long time, we have really needed a master plan for Patterson Farm. So you are so on point with that, because we felt who are farm preservationists have felt really unsupported by prior boards. And it's a great opportunity now for this board to embrace this concept of putting together a master plan and going over things that need to be reviewed and defining things. And like specifically with the farmland lease, the timing of the lease could be altered so that it's not up for consideration right when the farmer should already be on the land. So look at those things. look at the length of the lease, as you mentioned, and, really work it out and clearly define the tenant selection criteria for anyone who occupies any building on the farm. These are things that should be written. It should be reflective of the history of the property and respectful to it. And so the uses, as you say, Dennis, should mesh nicely with the farming and the continuation of that. One thing I wanted to say about alternative uses for the barns and the pack house. First of all, I really think Sam and Timmy should have the pack house and the barns. That should be included. To take the barn away from a farmer is like taking the meeting room out of a lawyer's office or something. I mean, it's a fundamental thing. It's necessary. So there are other agricultural uses. Reach out to Del Val College, see if they have a use that supports agriculture, that we could bring it down into this community. As far as Satterthwaite House, I came before the board in 2015, and I asked then the board, please let me head up a preservation effort so that we can have Satterthwaite restored by 2017, which would have been the 100th year anniversary of my family, the Doan family, I should say, coming to the Satterthwaite House. It never really happened. We formed the 501c3 in 2015. So Patterson Farm Preservation stands ready as always, as we have years ago. This is my 24th year of coming before the board on matters concerning the Patterson Farm. This is my life's work to make sure that the farm continues into the next generations to come. So our organization stands ready with grant writers, with fundraising. We would certainly love to have Satterthwaite House to be our home base, as the AOI has the Danny Brown House for their home base. We will put unlimited effort into getting that house back to what it should be. It's doable. I think it's a little bit of hyperbole to say it's almost ready to fall down, because I don't think that's the truth. There's magnificent yellow pine in there, magnificent woodwork. It is a grand home, and it can be again. And I'm sure Helen has a lot to say, but thank you very much. I feel like good progress has been made. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any other public comment? State your name and address for the record, please.
Dr. Helen Hines, 1355 Edgewood Road. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Mr. Stedman. It was delightful talking to Mr. Stedman. He is just gracious and kind and considerate and made you feel so good. It was very fun to talk to you. And I love what you've come up with. I think it's a reasonable way. You had a lot of cats to herd, and I'm not talking about the physical ones, but I am talking about the physical ones. And you managed to kind of do it pretty well. I'm excited about a master plan. I'm looking forward to helping whoever wants to take point on that. I'm really interested in working on the National Register nomination, because I actually started that back in 2005, and I'd really like to finish it correctly. So it would be something that I'm very interested in doing. I'm interested in writing Keystone grants and any other kind of grant that needs to be done. I'm ready to really step up and help whoever wants to work on this. I am thinking of it not as a problem, but as a huge asset and a treasure to our community. This is something that will actually make us so much different from any other community that adjoins 295. We have this absolutely beautiful farm that has been farmed since 1696 or 1686, when Thomas Janney, got off that boat and walked up there and started his sheep farm. That's just amazing that something that old is still in existence and still being farmed, actually by somebody who has a direct family connection to that family. The Quakers, there's nothing in Pennsylvania that honors our Quakers. There really isn't. Of course, there are plain people, simple people. They didn't want any honors. They wanted to be seen as just people that are on the land and then off the land. So there is nothing that really honors the Quaker tradition. There's something for Mennonites, there's something for Moravians, there's something for Lutherans, there's all over this state, there is something that memorializes certain groups. And this is the perfect place to memorialize our Quakers. I'm really, really looking forward to working with you on this. Good luck, guys.
Thank you so much. Any other public comment?
We have Florence on the line.
Oh, bring her in. Florence, are you there?
Florence, you're muted. Could you please hit *6?
Hello?
Maybe you'll have to back her out again and tell her how to unmute.
We're gonna try to pull her out and get her unmuted.
Okay, is there anybody else?
No one else online.
Okay, I'll wait for Florence. Mhm. The beauty of Zoom meetings, right?
Are you going to sing for us, James?
Pardon me?
Like when people on hold, you hear music. Are you going to sing for us?
Oh, not the acoustics aren't right in here. My throat
You
hasn't
don't
been
have your
right
guitar.
all week.
Here's Lauren.
Good
You
evening.
can do drums.
Good evening.
Hi, is this Florence?
This is Florence Wharton.
Hi, Florence. Welcome to the meeting. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I am Florence Wharton, WHARTON, at 301 North Bellevue Avenue, Langhorne, PA 19047.
Thank you, and your comments.
I just wanted to applaud this amazing presentation done by Mr. Stedman and the connection of the group that has pulled this plan together. It's exactly what is needed to move forward. It's really action oriented, and that's exactly what the property needs. But I would like to focus on the ground itself, the land itself, the care and concern that the board has brought to the buildings, to the barns, the outbuildings, the Slack property, and others. But when you come back to Patterson Farm, you really want to be able to protect the land for the future in perpetuity. And that would be done through a conservation easement on that 38-acre parcel. I've had some experience working at Heritage Conservancy with Linda Mead at with the conservation easements, and it will preserve and protect the land. There's many uses that can come from that. So I just wanted to bring that topic forward.
Yeah. So, go ahead, John. Yeah,
If I could, sure. If I could help Florence provide some detail on your request for conservation easement. When we executed the conservation easement on the vast majority of the land, that was done in October 2016. And at the time, the township was still engaged in litigation with the equine hospital, which had purchased 5 acres. I don't believe, and I was just checking with the solicitor, I believe that wasn't resolved until 2017.
I think at least, yeah, it went to
Right.
Commonwealth Court. I think there was actually an attempt to go to Supreme Court of
Yeah.
Pennsylvania on that too. So, yeah.
So what the township did in October of 2016 was the most restrictive agricultural easement that you could have on that property. The remaining 38 acres, the board at that time couldn't take action because it was under pending litigation for about 5 acres. Additionally, some of the uses that land is being used for is technically inconsistent with the restrictive nature of what we wrote for the remaining acreage. So for example, the leaf collection and process wouldn't be allowed in the areas where we have the restrictive easement. So at the time, the board thought, and again, that was a consensus of the board in 2016, 2017, which was once we've got a plan for the 38 acres, we could explore that down the road. But we didn't want to necessarily limit the ability for the township to store leaves or do other stuff. It's somewhat agricultural related, but because of the nature of the easement.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point, Supervisor Lewis. The definition of agriculture in the actual easement documents is pretty, as you've noted, is pretty restrictive. I mean, it certainly allows for what we have there, and I think we've done the township working with Sam and Tim Stewart have done a good job preserving that part of it, but the balance of it is more problematic. So, but it doesn't mean it can't be resolved through the process as well.
And I'm sure at the time that was done with the Heritage Conservancy, we could certainly explore something with Bucks County that would have the sense of what the final plan would be, because some of the things that were recommended couldn't be done in the other acreage under the way the easement's currently written. So that's why, we haven't gone back at that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your phone call, Florence. Thank you, Supervisor Lewis, for elaborating on that, and Dave as well. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you for the
No worries.
opportunity to speak again.
Sure.
Before the 2016 easement came up, years before that, we had come to that prior board. I'm going to say it's probably the early 2000s. And we successfully advocated for an application to the State Farmland Preservation Program. That application encompassed the entirety of the farm, and it was accepted at the state board level. It actually rose to the top of the list based on the quality of the land. And the acceptance of that conservation easement would have brought in about $2 million from that fund. The day before they were to sign the agreement, the county commissioners pulled the application. So I mention that because those 38 acres are the same 38 acres that were accepted previously in that early application. So I am suggesting that someone talk to Doug Wolfgang at the State Farmland Preservation Board, redo the application for the 38 acres and at least recover funds for those acres that may still be eligible for that program. So there's a little bit of income to use wherever else in the farm. And another thing I wanted to say about the income from the farm, if we could have a clear accounting of everything that comes in and earmark all those funds to stay on the farm in the future, that would be appreciated as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks again. Any
James?
other? Yes, Dan.
And I don't know if Dave knows this or John knows this or someone else does. Do we know, that's from the state's Department of Agriculture, there's different farmland preservation programs, ag security areas and conservation easements and other ones. I'm curious as to which program it was, because they each, they come with different stipulations and different definitions and whatnot. I'd be very curious to.
I could look at that. My recollection, as foggy as it is, may be that it's the agricultural security part of it, but I could be wrong. I could look at the documents in the next couple of days and try to, figure out which ones. I know the imposition and definition of agriculture may vary depending on which program that it's working under. So
that's why I'm asking. And typically ASAs have to be about 250 acres. We're a little short of that. So I was at least where we're at right now. So I'm curious as to which program it went through, because I think I look at ASAs for other reasons every now and again. I think they reevaluate them every 7-8 years, something like that, and it comes with some costs. So I'm just interested to see what the program is and how we might apply it. That's all.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Any other comments? Anybody else on the line? Excellent. Thank you again, gentlemen. Have a great evening. Thanks for coming out. Moving on to agenda item number 10. Andy, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, supervisors. We have within your packet my report. I would like to jump right into the agenda items. The first item A is to consider a resolution to request a statewide local share assessment grant for the Memorial Park Phase 3 project and to designate Kurt Ferguson as the official to execute all documents and agreements for the grant application. This is a local share assessment grant, is available now. The application deadline is March 15th. It is a maximum $1 million award. There is no match required, so it will be a highly competitive grant. If I can share my screen, I'll show you the scope of work for Memorial Park that we have intended for this grant application. It's really to, now I'll warn you, this is not a Dennis Stedman level exhibit plan, but hopefully with my explanation, it'll get the job done. The Memorial Park, what's shown here is two different viewports. On the left side is the western portion of the park, west of the memorial. That's where the new parking lot expansion was installed. And in this area, we would simply be line striping for the parking spaces and overlaying the base course that was installed as part of Phase 2 with wearing course. Similarly, on the east side of the park, the existing parking lot, we would be overlaying that existing base course with wearing course, and that is already work that is planned within this year's road program. And so we would be proposing a match dollar value for the application that would include that work, and also some forested buffer trees to be planted. That would be a part of the township match. The remaining items are items that were not installed in Phase 2, including bocce courts, horseshoe pits, a gazebo, a picnic pavilion, a playground. This would be a playground for mostly 5 to 12-year-olds, something that in discussions with Monica Tierney is needed based on the needs assessment that was completed for the township. And also there is another playground over on the western portion of the park that is for younger children and toddlers, so 5 to 12 year old playground would be appropriate in this area. And then also installing a pad and exercise equipment, which was previously planned for Memorial Park. So that is the work that is proposed in the grant application. Like I said, the grant application is due March 15th, and we are requesting, we would be requesting $900,000 as part of the grant application. Even though it will be competitive, we think that we have a strong application because we're not requesting the maximum. We do have some township matched funding, and also for the most part, the plans can be, the improvements can be shovel ready as we have the plans mostly completed for the work. So.
All right, Andy, so
Chairman.
you're looking for, yep, I was going to say, if you want, there you go.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to request a statewide local share assessment grant for the Memorial Park Phase 3 project and to designate Kurt Ferguson, Township Manager, as the official to execute all documents and agreements for the grant application.
Second. Just, to be clear, this also includes a resolution to enable that. So, yeah.
Any discussion? Any public? Oh, Dan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, just quick question, Andy. I mean, this is respectfully, the red lines are a little cartoonish on purpose, right? So when we submit a grant, how strongly do we have to stick to what's in here? How much flexibility, or I should say another way, how flexible is the grant in terms of how we lay things out, et cetera?
For this particular grant, there's not a lot of guidelines on that. So I would say that it's fairly flexible. I think that they're not going to quibble over locations of areas, but if we include it within the scope of work, then it's something that should be, it is going to require a cost estimate. It's going to require a scope of work. So I don't think that we can swap out or eliminate items from the scope of work.
Yeah.
In the application, but yeah.
No, and the only reason I ask without getting into details, some of the features that we have here, I know we use the playground on the other side all the time in the non-summer months, but in the summer months it's really hot because you don't have a whole lot of shade from trees and whatnot. So it would be nice if we added in some type of landscaping plan over by the gazebo. That would actually be a nice feature. Supervisor Blundy, when we were talking about a nice place for photos along a gazebo, that would actually be perfect if we could make something nice there versus like near the picnic tables and stuff like that. Just have a little shade while you're trying to eat. So if there's flexibility to do that, then that's great.
Yeah, I would agree that that's probably warranted for this project.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 Opposed, none. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item B is to consider pay application number 1, which would be the final pay application for the Community Center Entrance Improvements Project to Liberty Door Systems in the amount of $29,340.00. These are the new doors and entry system over at the community center. They have been installed. They're working in discussions with Monica. The users are very pleased with the door systems. And so we are recommending final payment for the work completed.
So moved.
Motion made by Fred, seconded by Dan. Any discussion?
So
Sure, Dan or Fred. Yeah, go ahead.
we do look like.
Yeah.
So Andy, I'm going to be snarky here because I can. Is this the last project for the community center that we have to correct?
I believe so. Nobody's come to me with any more.
No more wiring problems? The building's not sinking? No more, none of the other doors that were designed, maybe for residential purposes, we don't have to replace them. We're good now, right?
To my knowledge, yes.
Appreciate it. I just felt like being snarky today. I'm sorry. Thank you for your good work.
Any other discussion or comments?
Yeah. James, if I could real quick. I won't be quite that snarky, Fred, but I appreciate the comments given what we've heard over the years. I actually used those sadly very expensive doors today for the first time. I can report that they worked beautifully. I even pushed the buttons to make sure the doors automatically open, but they're solid. They close. They don't beep constantly like the other ones did, and you can actually close them the full way and not have to prop them open. Never like spending this much on redo work, but it's done. It looks good. So hopefully we can move forward, as Supervisor Weiss was saying, with no further issues and put this one to bed.
I'm
there
sorry.
may be some things in the near future we discuss.
Ah, you had to say it.
Okay. And did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I wanted to thank the Disability Advisory Board for their input in getting these doors installed. They did a great job, and I just want to thank them.
So we have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion by the supervisors? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. I cannot do the doors. All right, so the motion carries 4-1.
No positive.
You're not gonna say the guy who did the doors.
Right. Moving on to number 10C.
Yes, item C is to consider award of the 2022 pool painting project base bid in the amount of $53,225 and the bid alternate in the amount of $5,300 to RJR Engineering, Inc.
Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Fred, seconded by John. Any discussion by supervisors? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, I'm sorry, did you have something to say?
Good.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Okay. Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item D is to consider the award of the 2022 Community Park Tennis Court repairs. Base bid in the amount of $64,877.20. And the bid alternate to repair the basketball courts in the amount of $19,963.99 to Keystone Sports Construction.
Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Fred, seconded by Suzanne. Any discussion by the supervisors? Dan?
Just quick question. What sort of warranty do we have on this?
It would be a standard 18-month warranty.
On everything or just?
Yes.
Okay.
Kurt?
I want to make sure the board is perfectly clear on something with this, okay? First, the comment I was going to make, but I figured I could wait till now is that we budgeted $60,000 for the pool painting.
Okay.
So in the end, even with the alternate, we're a little under. This project, we budgeted for the tennis courts in the budget. And we budgeted, I think, excuse me, about $62,000. We added the basketball courts because even since we did the budget, they got increasingly beat up, and we added this. So this item in total is $84,000 or so, and we budgeted about 62. I've asked this to be put on there for you all to consider. I believe that the Park and Rec Fund, as it sits, can certainly absorb this cost. Those the basketball court, the 19,963, really does need to be repaired. And if you don't do it now, we're going to be forced to do it probably at a higher cost next year or even more if it's in worse condition, which it certainly will be. And it will impact the quality of the experience that kids are worse, like their dads that will twist their ankles trying to play with their kids will have. So we've put these both on there, but I want to make sure that's clear before you pass that motion, that in fact, this amounts to about a $20,000 overage from what we had anticipated out of the totality of this project.
And just to be clear, we're talking these basketball courts right here at the township, correct?
Correct.
Are we changing, is it just surfacing or are we changing rims?
I'm going to make them 8 feet so you can dunk on them.
Well, I want you to you need to make them 6 feet for me to be able to dunk on them. I'd love you to take away the double rims because I can never hit a 3-point shot on those stupid things. But is it just, no, really, is it just surface or rims? Or
Yes.
just, it's both?
Surface.
Just
No,
surface.
it's surface.
Okay.
It's all the surface.
Okay.
It's surfacing, it's crack repair and repainting and then restriping and the
Right.
lot.
Right.
Okay. Outstanding. So we have the motion on the floor, I believe. There was no further discussion, so call to question. All those in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Public comment.
Aye.
Public comment.
Oh.
Gosh, I always get caught on that. Anybody in the public comment? No. Call to question. All those in favor say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none.
Do it like
Motion
a
carries
jump shot.
5-0. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Project updates.
If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. As I had indicated in the last meeting, I'll continue to add. This list will get bigger. Some things will come off here soon, but the list will get bigger as we progress with things. So you'll see I added G there that will continue to report. But unless there's questions, I don't have anything to add.
I just had a question about 11B, the ponding on the pickleball. That's being, obviously it's an ongoing thing and we're addressing it.
Andy?
Yes, it's been documented and we are in discussions with the contractor. It's obviously a subcontractor to the contractor that needs to repair that, and they're aware of the issue.
The pickleballers are serious, Andy.
So am I.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
James,
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
similar question, I think. I'm not even sure if it's tied to the Memorial Park project or not. Kurt, do we have for context, I went for a run around Memorial Park this weekend, and there was some large spoil piles that look like, based on Google aerials, look like they've been there since maybe September-ish of 2020. I'm not sure what the genesis of the spoil piles are, but they're still there. They're mixed in with old silt fence. There's some vegetation starting to grow on top of them. But it looks like something that came from a previous project that a contractor didn't remove from the site. They're like silt fences, probably because there's a stream right next to it. But the silt fence has been removed from where the stream was, or is, I should say, next to the stream, and is now mixed in with the pile. Wasn't sure which contractor that was, which project that was, but it looks like it's been there a while. So we want to make sure that we get that taken care of. And if we can identify the contractor, I'm not sure if we paid them or not, if we still have money in escrow or what it is, but Kurt, you look like you had something there.
No, that's not this project. So I just want to that was not an oversight of Remington Vernicourt's inspectors. I know that the Public Works Director went down and took a look at that. Jim Majewski has discussed that with Andy, but that would not have been something that as part of this project, I think even Andy's girls would have stumbled on, but we'll make sure it's taken care of, and anything we can tie back, we certainly will attempt to do so.
Thank you, sir. Any other? Yeah, John.
One last question. Are we close on a formal opening date? Because I'm getting questions of people who want to play.
I think
in order to repair the surface, we need 48 hours of 50 degrees or higher. And so that's what we're waiting on.
Yep. And then we'll get that second coat down, and then we'd be able to reopen at that point.
It'd be like April, probably.
Probably. I mean, that's probably right.
Okay.
Any other supervisor question on project updates? Great. Hearing none, moving to agenda item number 12, manager's report. Back at you, Kurt.
Unless there's any questions, I don't have anything to report.
Any questions on the manager's report from any of the supervisors? Nope. Number 13, Dave, you're up.
Yes, sir. Briefly, there was an executive session tonight, started at 6:30, ended at about 7:20 or so. No, actually 7:35, I'm sorry. All board members were present, and items related to litigation and personnel were discussed. Also present was my partner, Barbara Kirk, briefly for discussion, and the chief. And I think that's all about that. On the zoning hearing board, there's an appeal that's before the board tonight. Appeal number 22-1953, Scott Glennie. Appeals for the property located at 5 Shelley Lane, tax parcel 20-043-072. He requests a variance from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-23 capital B in order to construct a 198 square foot rear yard addition, which would increase the impervious surface from the existing 20.81% to 22%, where 18% is the allowable amount. The zoning hearing board sees these types of applications frequently. We would recommend deferral unless there's a separate opinion on that. Hearing none, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Number 15, zoning inspections and planning. I believe that would be Jim.
Is
he here?
He's in the house, as they
building.
say.
Hello, Jim.
3 times rhythmically, like yells.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Jim.
Somebody go.
He's our very own Beetlejuice.
He is in the house. There was a Jim sighting about a half an hour.
I did see him come in and interact with Miss Hines back there, so I'm assuming that is he here?
He heard pool and wanted
I
to go
think
for a
he's,
swim.
yeah, we're on number 15. We're waiting for him to,
It's about the giant sign, the
Yeah.
Harvard application.
is it a giant sign or a sign of a giant?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
A little bit of both.
Yes. We did that incidental music here now is what we need. Yeah.
Ginormous.
Get your guitar, I'll get my bass. We'll do
We'll just entertain him, man.
Yep.
I'm telling you, if this keeps going, we're gonna have to get the band back together. Suzanne's been dying for it.
Lit up.
Promises were made.
Promises were made. It's okay. We'll wait. We'll just jump right down to public comment. Is there any public comment? Nobody in the audience? Is there anybody online talking? Anybody? Nobody?
No public comment online.
No public comment. Okay, so we'll take that one off the board. Sure, no problem. Yeah, we can go to discussion items, number 17. Were there any discussion items, any of the supervisors? Hearing none. Let's go through supervisor reports, number 18. Parks and Recs Board continues to work on a needs assessment. It's a huge undertaking, and obviously you heard from the ad hoc committee tonight. Those guys have done an amazing job. Fred, do you have anything to report?
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Dan?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you, Dan. Suzanne?
I don't have anything.
Thank you, Suzanne and John.
I have nothing as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You guys aren't doing a good job stretching this out.
They really want us to sing, I think. Other business, is there any other business that we need to know about? Appointments to boards and commissions. I believe that there was one interview tonight, but it was canceled. It was for the economic, so we don't have anybody to appoint or interview. So now we are back to number 15. So we're waiting for Jim. Jim, if you're there.
There he is. I saw him.
There he is.
Hello.
There he is.
He does exist. Jim, what do you want to tell us about the giant sign?
The applicant for the sign, they're making a minor change to the sign. As you all see, it basically looks essentially like the existing sign, except one part of the A has like a little leaf on it instead of a straight line. So basically, they went to the Historical Architectural Review Board and they unanimously recommended approval by the Board of Supervisors for a certificate of appropriateness for the sign at the Giant Shopping Center.
Excellent. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Suzanne, seconded by Dan. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, call to question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say, I'm sorry, did you?
I'm not sure if they're a client right now. I'd have to check. So if anybody,
Oh, if they're a client of yours.
yeah, so sorry.
You want to just recuse yourself?
If I could just maybe abstain.
Yeah, abstain. Okay.
Yeah.
Call to question. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 And then one abstain. So the
Yeah.
motion carries 4.
Not that I'm against Giant. I shop there a lot, particularly the one in Morrisville.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Excellent. Well, it looks like we ripped through the other agenda items, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Second.
Motion made by Fred, seconded by Dan. All those in favor say aye, raise your hand. Aye. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone.